Hey everyone, welcome back. Hopefully you guys are doing pretty good. Let's go ahead and continue along here. So we have some pretty good progress made. And I think the next thing that we should tackle is probably this big pink front plate. I think working from the bottom up is probably kind of the best approach, because the further up we go, the further, or rather the more sort of like smaller pieces we have, and we can bundle those together into their own part. I said we're going to be returning to these guys here, and that includes this top plate, and I think it would be kind of good to bundle it with all these non-textured parts, and we can kind of focus in on this pink plate right now. So for this guy, it's actually the same material as pretty much everything else. So we're just going to be copying what we did here and pasting it into this pink layer. I think I originally thought this was plastic, but after looking at the reference quite a bit more, it is definitely the same metal. So let's go back to our frame materials here. And I was actually just recording this, and I got about 30 minutes into it, and ended up getting a crash and kind of losing everything. So after that, I'll probably be saving quite a bit more during this. But anyways, let's go ahead and copy this material. This is going to be the material we have for the entire frame that we've made. So just give it a second. We swapped between layers, so it's going to take a little bit to sort of sync up to everything here. And this project has really kind of pushed my computer to the limit. It's not necessarily a bad computer, but it's just Painter running this much stuff at once is quite a bit. So I'm going to do what I can to try and alleviate some of that stress and prevent any more crashes. So let's copy these layers. It's going to take a second because it's copying quite a bit, and we can go down to our plastic layer and paste these guys in here. Let's give that a second to sort of load into place. And all in all, it does a pretty good job of kind of syncing up to the look of what we had before. Obviously, there's no sort of manually painted information in this, so we're going to have to go through and do that. We're not going to need this plastic layer anymore, so we can go ahead and get rid of that. And similar to when we duplicated stuff around in the keyboard section, what we're going to do is just turn off every layer and just sort of work our way up again. And yeah, it should be a pretty good approach. So we're not working on rubber, we're not working on screws, we are working on steel painted worn. And let's just, go through and turn off layers, and just kind of work our way up. So no rust, we're not going to need dirt. As you can see, our mask has already applied this pattern to the front. We're going to have to make some changes to it, but it seems to be kind of laid out properly and taking the correct shape, which is good. Mostly I would attribute that to the UVs being pretty straight, but all in all, it's pretty good. We're going to dive back into Photoshop in a little bit and make a few small changes to it, nothing too big, but it's definitely got us like most of the way there. So let's see, we're down to our paint. I'm not going to mess with the rust or anything because that's just this corner stuff. What I am going to do is drag this out a bit so we can see what we're doing here. So the paint, I'm not going to change. The height, obviously this is all our peeling paint stuff. I'm not going to mess with that. We can probably save that for the end actually to get this sort of chipped paint look that we were doing before. Surface imperfections, let's turn that back on. It's kind of like our bumpy paint, which is nice. Speckles is pretty good. What I am going to do though is turn them down. I don't think we need too many on the front here. It seems a little overdone. So let's just pull the position back a little bit. Like having some is okay, like very light like that is cool. Speckles water damage is one that we kind of went overboard with, right? So let's grab a brush that we like and just sort of paint out a lot of this stuff. Let's see if we can find a good one. Something a bit lighter and softer so we can sort of gradually get rid of it. Mold is a good one. I think I was using that a bit in the last part too. The opacity set to 0. We can just sort of paint out a lot of it. I am also actually going to turn the tiling up a little bit. Seems like the spots were a little bit too big, but I just don't want them to be in any really overly obvious place. I want them to be like more slight surface imperfections. And I don't want it to be too noticeable that it's repeating either. Just trying to be conscious of kind of all the places this material wraps around, and then the inside as well. Which, it looks more natural here, like the inside's going to get more dusty and that kind of stuff, but still just going to pull it back a little bit in there. Let's go up to our scratches layer. So this is an interesting place to have scratches because at least the bottom half we can never really reach there. It's mostly just this area, so if there were scratches, it would pretty much just be in these two areas, and even then they're not really areas that'd be touched or pressed against anything very much, so we can sort of really pull back on the scratches. That being said, I still want a few. I think the trick here is to have more smaller ones, so we can turn the scale up a little bit. So we're getting some little guys here and there. I think it's still a bit too big. So let's reel it back in to about 11, maybe 9, 10. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then we can sort of just paint out some of the ones near the bottom where we wouldn't really get any scratches. Scratches up here seem more normal because you might actually put your fingers on an area up here. We're getting a lot of water damage layer up here. I'm just gonna crank that down. Back to the scratches. I'm gonna erase all the scratches from the inside because yeah, really nothing to scratch in here, right? It doesn't make any sense. So we can just kind of clear that out. Okay, let's work our way up even more. Rust. This is rust occlusion. So it's going to mostly be targeting sort of pockets and darker areas. Let's go ahead and turn that up a bit. Not too much. You can kind of see it around this bottom area, affecting the roughness. But we can push that a bit further for sure. And maybe it's one where we have to turn it down to bring it up. Really not seeing too much of a change. Okay, there we go. But that's when the level's like pretty maxed. Let's put it back to the middle and maybe turn the grunge up a little bit. This might be more what we're looking for. And we can see it coming in here. It's looking pretty natural too. Some spots there. There's one reference in particular that I like quite a bit, and we're seeing a little bit of dust there. But there's this guy here has some kind of cool rusty splotchy effect, so we might be able to mimic that a little bit with this layer. Maybe if we just sort of keep the grunge as it is and turn the level up a bit. I'm really liking how that's looking, because it's not uniform, it's not following everything around. We're getting a weird scratching effect there, which I'm going to try and pull back a little bit. And same with this, I'm just going to lower it a bit. But really happy with that one corner. Some asymmetry is always good. I'm expecting to see a lot of the rust in here, yeah. It is AO based after all, so it makes sense to crawl up here. And I don't want to completely get rid of it, just kind of bring it back in, and I might even go in with a really low value and place them in manually. Kind of get these bottom areas. And that scratch still looks a bit weird, so I'm going to tone it back a little bit. Okay. Not bad. Maybe pull that in a little bit. I do remember that this rust is actually the same as this one. When I previously recorded this, it sort of gave the exact same effect, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that because I know we don't need it. Let's go for the occlusion dirt. This is going to be targeting these areas in here, as well as more of the inside of things. So let's turn our dirt levels up and see if we can notice anything. Okay, it's definitely caking more of the inside. I like the pattern that it's bringing, but I don't want to go overboard with it. And on the front, we're getting a little bit, but definitely not a lot. Very subtle. So we might just want to cake in a little tiny bit in the corner. That's a little obvious. Let's lower our opacity. Kind of pile it on top of the rust. And then we already know it's very dusty in here, so we can kind of add some of that dust sort of spilling out a little bit and resting on top. Okay, do the same on the other side. I'm expecting a lot of, dust to be naturally resting in there. That makes sense. And then a darker tone to just kind of pull it all back in. Nice. It does seem overall pretty crazy dusty though. I don't know if that's the rust. Maybe it's just the angle, but it seems like it's a little too beaten up for my liking right now. So maybe get some of these areas to chill out a little bit. Okay, cool. Dust speckle. Let's see. This is just more of a general dust over everything. I don't know if we really need that for this right now, so I'm going to keep it off. Dirt blobs, though, is more big chunks. Which is kind of close to this effect, so I'm going to keep it for now. Let's see if we can sort of fine-tune it a little bit better. Sort of scale it up, or maybe we want to scale it down, actually. Balance. Pull it back in a little bit. And we could just sort of paint around this a little bit and just sort of tone it all down because it's a little much. I do like having some big splotches on it, but just not anything too crazy. Pull this all back in a little bit. I do have to say though, before I go any further, I apologize if my mic picks up any stuff in the background. Currently, this is the whole COVID quarantine thing, and finding some more time to have like a more quiet workspace is a little more difficult, and I'm just trying to continue to produce this content, so I'm just kind of working at a time where I know it's a little bit more noisy, but I don't think my mic will pick things up too much, and obviously my voice is going to overpower it anyways, so just kind of apologies for that in general, because I know it's going to be picked up in one way or another. But we can keep working through it anyways. Let's work our way up to rust spots. This is kind of like the last major one that we're going to be doing of kind of this reuse layer. And I think we use triplanar for this. Let's just try and move this and find a nice pattern on the front that we're a fan of. I'm trying to see if I can play off having some more rust spots kind of in that rusty area we already made. See if we can rotate it. I just don't want to overdo it, right? I don't want them to be too big, so we might want to turn the scaling up a bit to like 1.5. See if we can get a little bit there. And it spreads here, which might just be a bit too much. I want to turn the histogram position down. Try a different random rotation value. And I kind of like that right there, kind of offset middle rust where we'd expect it to be. And then it's natural to have rust on the inside, but I don't really want it on these teeth area, at least too much, and just sort of tone it all down a little bit. I think that's looking pretty good. And yeah, we worked our way all the way up to the fingerprints. We can save that for a little bit later. So let's go ahead and save, and then we're gonna retackle this painted area and kind of add a few new things to it. Okay, so what can we do to this sort of main paint to fix it up a little bit and make it a bit better for us? Well, first let's go ahead and find where we've gone ahead and hidden that. I think it's paint decal. And let's just sort of manually adjust this this mask a little bit. So things are chipping pretty crazy in the front in most of the references, even in this one where it's really grimy. The front is mostly intact because we're not really coming into contact with it very much. So let's adjust the balance on this and see if we can get it back to a more usable state. Like we want some procedural wear, but not too much. Like that's already, I think, looking quite a bit better. I also noticed that it seems to be brighter in the reference. So I'm going to raise the brightness and make it a little bit more yellow. Like so. That doesn't mean I don't want to paint out some areas. I'm going to want some more rust near the bolts, so we can sort of target some areas, and then we'll spill some rust over in some different layers. So I can just sort of completely gnaw out some areas here, and I'm just sort of using the paint layer above the generator that we've previously set up. So we can just sort of chip that away a little bit. I don't want to go too crazy with it, but make it obvious enough, like the intent of what's going on here. And then kind of at the bottom here, I think it would be a bit lighter. And then since we already have some rust climbing up here, we might as well take advantage of that to chip it out. Just sort of blend it a little bit more naturally. But I want the logo to be visible. Okay, let's go to some of those rust layers and start painting that stuff in. So we have rust occlusion, and we can just sort of, well, first of all, turn our grayscale up. That's probably going to help. And just sort of like paint in some rust, as in these sort of bolts. These areas are naturally going to pick up a lot of this grime and rust, and spill it over, and it kind of looks more natural that it's taking out some of this yellow paint, because the yellow paint would have been applied on top of everything, and these edges, when the screws are put in, are going to be stripped of their paint. The rust can naturally spill over, and we're just trying to think of like how this would be sort of set up in the real world. And you can see it kind of looked bad when we just sort of masked it out, but now that we give like a reason for it by spilling this rust into it, it kind of becomes a bit more believable. And the grayscale is pretty low on this. Like, I don't want it to be too overpowering, just more suggestive. I can even paint in some rust in the corners here. Just making sure we're not overdoing it though. Kind of has to feel like a natural. Kind of a natural effect. Okay, that's not half bad. I still think the paint color could probably be adjusted a little bit. Maybe it's the saturation that I'm not liking. Or maybe the wear itself we could probably paint in a bit better. I think we could probably bring some of that back, because this is kind of like the least likely area to get damaged. And then kind of counter that with some other areas. I'm liking that quite a bit. Cool. So maybe we could add a little bit more rust down here. Should probably turn it on. I don't want it to look generated though, so we can kind of blend it out better. I am noticing that this area has also been included. So I think this layer might be... No, there's a different rust that's driving this. I think this is the right material. Let me just turn this whole thing off and see if this is correct. So I'm just going to turn it off. No, so this is part of our main shell, so scratch that. We'll have to come back to that in a second when we're done this front plate. But until then, we can just still paint in some more manual rust. Kind of push some of these areas a bit further. Kind of makes sense to have it in these sort of corners. This area turned out pretty nice. I think that actually might be part of the main frame, but either way I think it looks good how it's pressed up in the corner, giving off that effect. But all in all, I'm just going to try and play to the asymmetry of it a bit and sort of pick one side to push further and the other side to be kind of more normal. It's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and save, and then we're going to dive back into Photoshop, where I'm going to show you how exactly I would go about turning this logo into more of this, because this has a couple layers to it, so I kind of want to mimic that a little bit. So let's save and then dive into Photoshop. Okay, so we're in Photoshop, and let me show you exactly what I was talking about and what I'm trying to do here. So currently we have the yellow, and it's done pretty good, but if we look at the logo, there's actually a dark blue, more of a light blue, and then an outline to everything. And typically what I'd want to do is go on Google and just sort of find this logo, and then we could sort of bake this logo into the texture. But it seems that I can't really find the logo anywhere. It doesn't seem like this specific type is kind of in HD and straight on that I can find. So I'm going to be sort of replicating this a little bit. We can also see that there's kind of like a crackle effect that we can sort of mimic over everything. And then there's a border around some of the other elements. So let's go ahead and try and do what we can to mimic that. We have our sort of Underwood type here. So this is it. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer by hitting Control J, and let's just take this logo, and with Control T we can move it and just sort of move it off a little bit in an attempt to mimic this dark blue layer. In fact, I'm just going to change the color so it's a bit easier to see. I'm just going to darken it a little bit with hitting Control U. So we can kind of move it kind of like right here, and then we can use this as dark blue. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this again, lower the opacity on that a little bit, move it a little bit more to use this as the lighter blue. And then we have the outline to everything. So let's deal with these one at a time. I'm going to add a new layer in, and let's just make the background black, kind of like the background of our mask here. So I can just put black in my foreground and hit Alt backspace, and it's going to fill our layer in with our foreground color. And let's just sort of focus in here. So this is our main one. This is our dark blue, so then we can turn our brightness back all the way to white. We can hit File, Save As, and call this frame decal underscore dark blue. Hit OK on that. We then have this guy here, which we can turn the brightness all the way back onto. Save this as light blue. And we're just using these as masks like we did before, just for more specific things. Like I said, this would be a lot easier if we found a logo for something, but we weren't able to, so we're just going to go with this. And then with all three of them together, I'm going to group them, or hit Control E to merge them into one. And we can then, what's the best way to do this? I'm going to hit Control U, turn the lightness all the way down, go to Effect, and we can stroke it. So this is how we get our outline. Let's change the color of that to white. We're getting our outline here. We can turn the size to about 3. And then we can save as frame decal edge, and that'll do. I'm not going to save, or I'll just close out of this actually. But if we go back into Substance Painter, we should be able to import those and use those to sort of layer up a little bit and kind of get this look to it. So let's see, have that on desktop, typewriter, work files, baked textures, frame, decals dark blue, decals edges, decals light blue. Just the 3, I'm pretty sure. And we can just sort of set these all to texture and start to set this up. So just import this to our project. Go ahead and let Substance Painter do its thing. Cool. Okay, we got them in here. We can go back down to our decal layer. I'm going to start putting these in. So we can just go ahead and duplicate what we already have. So just Control D on it. Make sure the yellow one's on top. It's always consistently on top, but we go back one and we have this dark blue. So let's go ahead and change our fill on this to decal light blue edges, dark blue. Put that in there. You can see it kind of pushes this back a little bit. We're going to go ahead and change this color to mimic this here. It's almost like a purpley-ish, desaturated, darker. Darker blue. I'm just trying to get the color right. Something along those lines there. We're just going to call this dark blue. Then we're just going to sort of repeat for the other ones. So we can, let's see. Yeah, duplicate this, pull it down, call it light blue. Find our light blue one, use that as our mask. So it's going to push it back even further. This one's more like a saturated lightning blue almost, kind of in this ballpark. And we're mimicking it, you know, honestly not that bad. And then we have one last one, which is just kind of the black highlight around it all. So let's go ahead and do that. Duplicate, call this decal edges. Can just make this pretty much black. And plop in the correct map for that. Okay, not bad. Definitely want that to be more gray, but having a little color in there is a pretty nice touch. We do have this sort of mess up here though. So I'm just going to manually paint that out. Should probably add a paint layer to do that. Paint, turn it all the way down. Sweet, and it's looking a lot more like this now. It does make the grime on it look a little bit worse, all things considered. And I think I might actually want to push the blue a little bit more. Sweet, looking much better. We're also noticing that we have a sort of black highlight around all the pattern stuff here, so it might be worth going in and doing that in Photoshop. So if I bring this back, just gonna let it do its thing. We can just sort of do something very similar where we just sort of add some edges to it. I'm actually going to grab everything and just combine it. This is just a really botched job, but this is just pretty temporary. Then, since we already have this information, I'm going to go ahead and erase it. and then just add a very subtle stroke to everything, just like we did before. And we're going to want this to be set to center, so it's coming from the inside and the outside. Or no, there's a better way to do this. We can go to like do a mask selection. So if we hold Control and then click our layer, it's going to select everything in it. We can then go to Select, Modify, Expand, and then grow it by like 2 pixels maybe. And it's going to grow everything a little bit. And then we can put white in our foreground, hit Alt Backspace, it'll fill it all in, and we should be good to go. I'm just going to go ahead and save as frame decal borders. And there's certain areas like the back where we don't really want it, so I might actually just straight up remove that. Same with like here, but I guess we should see how it goes first, but definitely this area I want to remove. This area would definitely be like painted on, so let's go ahead and save again. We can go ahead and bring that into Substance Painter and then see if, first of all, if it's the right thickness, and then if these guys look okay. So let's see, frame decal borders, I can drag this in as a texture for the project only import, and it'll do its thing. So let's make another duplicate of this guy. We're just going to call this decal, or we're actually just going to call this edges. Easy to remember. We don't need the paint layer on it, and we can just sort of put in our new layer. We can see we're getting edges on everything. I don't want height on that then. It does look nice to have a bit of a trim to it, not gonna lie, but we're gonna have to adjust the colors to be a bit more obvious. It seems like this is a kind of like a rougher but black color, so we can turn the darkness up. Maybe not that intense. But having a border on it seems to be helping. I just want it to be a bit less noticeable, just like barely there. Not bad. We're going to do the same here though, actually. So we're going to jump back to the frame itself, go to its paint layer, find its peeling paint, paint decals. We're going to duplicate this. We're also going to make this a bit brighter like we did with the other ones. So we made it a bit more yellow, and we brightened it slightly. So let's just give that a second to load, and then we're just going to mimic it. Okay, and then let's just duplicate that guy, move him back on top. We're going to call this edges as well. Swap these guys out and turn off height, turn the roughness up, and make it black with a very faint highlight to it, just like that. Just like barely noticeable, but adds a bit of realism to it. And I think it looks pretty good on the front too. Another thing though is this slight sort of like crinkle to it, like some height information. I'm going to add that in here as well. So we're going to add a fill layer. We're going to call this height crinkle. Turn everything off, but height information, and it's going to be similar to what we did here. So it might be like barely noticeable, but nevertheless, it's going to go pretty far in helping this, honestly. So let's go ahead and turn the height up a little bit. And we can add a black mask, add a fill to it, and put our cells texture in there. Cells is the one that gives us that kind of natural looking, like crusty look. So it's affecting everything because it's not in a group that is masked out by this kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and do that first. We're going to call this height mask. Like, it's affecting everything here because the larger group that it's in is relying on these guys' masks, so it can apply to everything, but this one isn't affected by that. So let's add a black mask. We're going to add a fill layer to it, and we're going to add this map that we just made. And then we can put this into the group, and it's just going to be affecting the height information here. Okay. So first of all, that height information is kind of nuts. From there, we're going to want to scale this. Getting some kind of bump information on there, but it's not necessarily what we're going for. It's probably because the value is too high. Let's change it to like 3. See some subtle differences. And turn the contrast down. Maybe just lower the height a bit. It doesn't seem like we have the resolution to sort of do the effect I want, but either way, getting a little bit of height on here seems to kind of be the right way to go. So either way, I'm going to copy this and bring it back to the front plate. So we can copy layers, minimize this, and we can go back to where we were. I'm going to paste it in here. I'm going to save first though, just in case we get any weird crashes or something. Okay, let's go ahead and just plop this guy up top. Control V to paste. And yeah, we're getting some height info on there. Cool. Upon looking at this further though, I kind of want to fix this mask a little bit. I think we were a bit too harsh with the damage. Like, I think we need some areas that are smooth. The front being a pretty good example. Seems like there's some height information on some of these layers. I'm going to turn off the height on some of the background ones. Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go. And then we can go back to painting. It was just a bit too much going on there. kind of like having one side be really affected while the other one isn't. It's just like if I'm beating up something on one side, I want the other side to be more pristine. Like I don't want it to be like a carbon copy. So we get more damage here and way more here and not so much here. We got this side kind of spilling off. And all in all, I'm pretty happy with how that's turning out actually. Kind of liking the unique rust coming up the side. We might want to ding out some areas on the logo. It's looking pretty pristine, all things considered. So maybe some of the letters can be a little nicked up, especially on this side where things seem to be a bit more damaged. I think that's a pretty good look. Now, one thing that we haven't done yet is this kind of damage here. That scratch is in a pretty bad place. Now that I look at it, I'm not going to be able to forget it, so I'm just going to try and fix it. But I want to do this kind of damage here, just very subtly. Let me just get rid of that. Having a scratch over top of the rust seems a bit weird. So let's go ahead and try and set that up for us. We already have the whole paint system in place where we go to base and the paint layer. I am going to save this though, because this is what crashed everything last time. So really quickly, just going to save this, then we can start finding some more of these damaged areas and peeling some paint out of there a bit more seriously. Okay, so we can paint that out. Let's go ahead and do so. And turn this up to like a mid-level and kind of tackle these areas where the paint is peeling and we already have some rust. Just keep sort of adding on it until it pops through. Okay, we're getting some chunks out. Looks like our grayscale is pretty low. So it's a pretty natural looking chip. Kind of want to bring some attention to the bottom. Nah, it's bulging out way too much. Gonna just add a subtle amount here. I think that looks pretty good the way it is. Can do the same up here. Just like little air bubble cracks, it looks pretty good. Our reference doesn't have too much large damage in this area, so I'm really gonna kind of try my best to not go too far with it. Like, I think that was just a bit too much. Like, I'm really trying to hug the bolt so the height information doesn't go too crazy. But I think that's fine. It's a bit exaggerated, but I think it's fine. Let's try and do some more down here, maybe. The reference for the front did have the bottom area resting a little bit. It's a pretty good look. We just gotta match it on the bottom. Nice. The side could be kind of spilling over here. Not bad. Wonder if on the inside we'd want anything. Well, we already have this area kind of like taking damage. So we can just sort of go over this. It would explain a lot of the rusting here. We also have kind of like a really nice effect when we make it bumpy. And let's just try and connect these. Just, oh, man, I love how the paint kind of just bubbles when you only add a little bit. But it's kind of not really the most natural place for paint to chip, so I'm just going to reel it in a little bit. That's a lot. Let's do one quick sort of stroke over. And yeah, I think that looks pretty good. See if this side, if there's anything we can do. Maybe down here. It's kind of a weird spot for it. Maybe in the corner. Yeah, it's not bad. And then we also kind of have like a bumpy area here that we can work with. It's kind of a nice chip. Let's see if we can do a little bit more to it though. We do have our value set pretty low, but I like that, especially when you're looking at it from here. It's pretty good. And we might be able to get maybe something on the front. Kind of playing to these scratches we added in earlier. Yeah, that looks kind of bad, doesn't it? Let's get rid of that. Something here seems a little bit more natural though. That's a nice, like, really subtle crack. I mean, if we can get something like that here, I'm cool with it. No, it looks too weird, too forced. Ah, did we get rid of this? I think I did too many backspaces. We can still get it back. Not quite the same, is it? It was perfect before. Now I'm trying to try and get it back desperately, but I think this is still. No, it is pretty bad. It's too like pill shaped. Let's just try and like wobble it out a little bit. It should be fine. Yeah, that's cool. If we can taper one end, I'd be fine with it. Yeah, I'm cool with that. This is too bubbly still. What else? I do want to fix this. This seems really forced. We could probably get some of these screws in here. Can even turn up the value for these guys a little bit, I'd say. That's a pretty good chunk. This one I'm going to go all the way around. Yeah, I'm cool with that. And then this. That'll do. Similar on this side. And then this one, I want it to be more camera facing. So I'm sort of pulling it towards us. Yeah. Something really nice. The layers are really stacking up good. I still want to say something seems off with this yellow part. I don't know if I want to make it brighter or what exactly it is. Less saturation maybe? Darker with less saturation? Maybe the edges around it. I can brighten a little bit. Or do I want to darken them? Maybe it's the roughness. Let's go check out our roughness view. Make the edges rougher. And then the decals themselves like still rougher than the paint, but not as rough. Let's go ahead and start painting some of these things again. I also wanted to clean up like this stuff. And we can add more along the way. Let's see, rust occlusion. This is a pretty bad offender here. Can paint that out. Having it right there as well. Paint it down. I think it's just there's not enough going on, so I kind of want to kind of spread the rust a little bit further here. Turn it up even. Have it lead there. Down the side here. But also kind of not too much. I also don't want the brush pattern to be too obvious. Let's see. Still have open space here. Maybe the occlusion dirt can solve that. Or no, we still have dirt speckle that we haven't really been doing anything with. Let's see if we can turn that into something more akin to what we're looking for. Let's find a different type of dirt, grunge, and see if we can get it to kind of coat what we're working on a little bit better. We can always turn to reference as well for like a good idea, but we don't have very many front shots of it being very dirty. It kind of has this rough overall look to it that we're missing, I think. But let's just work on this first and then we'll return to that. Marble veins, rock, scratch, rust fine. This might be a good starting place. Turn the balance way down. We can turn the roughness way up. Can drop the saturation on this. It's not adding a ton, but I guess it can stay. Dirt Bobs is getting a little too big for its bridges. I think we could probably cut out a lot of this information. We don't want it to just be info for the sake of info, right? This side makes sense. I like the rust climbing, but this side, not so much. Let's just go ahead and make this sort of grainy. Yeah, kind of grainy look to it and see if we can get anywhere with that. I'm not sure if that's the look we're going for, but we can at least try it and see where it goes. But that would be way at the bottom. Or I guess it doesn't really matter. We could put it above the paint and it should still be fine. Near surface imperfections would probably be a good spot. We can just start with height on this. Add a black mask with a fill layer and go for just some sort of noise. Perlin noise is typically the best for this. And then let's actually affect the height. Something really subtle like 0.01. You can see a little bit. It looks more painty that way, honestly. This is already a good start. Height bump would be a pretty good name for this. And then we can just sort of affect the tiling amount. Getting some weird horizontal banding. That's weird. But it really is breaking things up quite a bit in like a really nice way. Let's see if we can tile it more. More is better. We're getting some weird scratches. Maybe triplanar is the way to go. But that's already looking much more like a old painted surface in my opinion. We can just sort of see if there's like better heights to go. Should we go half of that? No. Should we go double it? Definitely not. I think we really had the sweet spot, but I think I might go a little lower, 0.008 instead of 0.01. And I think that adds a lot to it. I'm going to copy this layer and we're going to actually put it on the main one too, because I think it's adding quite a bit. Sort of paste that on. Take a look at what it's doing. Very like super subtle, but looks much more painted this way. But in this, I think I might even lower the height a little bit more. I think maybe we could wrap this up if we do something like this, but like right here, that might just be like the missing piece. I just feel like this side is a little empty. So let's go back to paint, base, normal. Just start low and just kind of paint some stuff in there. That might not really be the look that we're going for, is it? Start even lower maybe and go wider. Yeah, definitely not. Maybe just one of these. Yeah, getting a little extra height is cool, but not without like a purpose for it. Okay, like we're onto something with that. Like I'm pretty happy with that, but I just want it to be more kind of like a shape that's consistent. We could probably work with this. I think this was definitely like a less is more thing, and then just kind of pull it back a little bit. It's just something here could definitely be used. And I might just be overthinking it. It might be as simple as going to rust occlusion, adding some red in here, going back to our paint system and like chipping at a corner here. It's like honestly not that bad. Not too bad. I might carry this up a little bit. Make it a bit more extreme so we can control it and just get like a little triangle shape. And then maybe get rid of some. I think that might be it, unless I might just want to try and just like stamp right here. No, maybe subtler. No, it's a bit weird. And then this rust info is a little too on the nose and obvious. So let's go ahead and pull that in a bit. trying to avoid these very obvious kind of effects here. And like we can just keep adding to this forever, right? But at some point we kind of have to move on to the next thing. So let's see. We've been recording for just over an hour. But like I said, like I was recording for maybe 30 minutes before this thing crashed. So I've been at it for a little bit. I think this might be a good place to stop, unless we see any like glaring issues from him, like this angle here. Some good rust variation on the bottom. Might want to revisit that actually. From the top, dust is collecting pretty naturally actually. I'm liking that. No, I'd say that part's good for now and we can return to it later. Those feet though, I think could use a little bit of work. I think I want them to just be dusty on the bottom, and I think that'd be good enough. So let's close this for now. Let's go to our rubber layer. We have rubber dry. We can just kind of add a new layer to it. New fill layer. Let that load for a second. Just call it bottom dust. Give it kind of like a slight yellowish tint. Roughness way up. We don't need metal information. And then we can add I think a smart material might be a good way to do this. Smart material. Or sorry, smart mask is what we're looking for. Because there's going to be a mask that sort of knows where the bottom of this is. But let's go ahead and save first, since we haven't done that in a little bit. Okay, and yeah, let's see some smart masks. I think one of them is called just ground dirt, and it's going to be able to tell where the bottom is, or dirt ground. There might be a couple other ones that can tell where the bottom is. Ground dirt. Wait, is there ground dirt and dirt ground? Nice. So I was half right. Yeah, sun fade is the opposite. Let's just go for ground dirt, since it doesn't seem to have any sort of like AO effects to it. Can turn that on. Can turn this off for now. And let's see. Let's go to position gradient. Interesting. Okay, position gradient isn't doing too much. World space normal. Yeah, okay, we're looking to invert it, that's why. Okay. Let's turn this down a little bit. I want it on the bottom here. Turn texture up so we're getting some more randomness. Really just looking for something like this. And then turn the saturation down, turn the opacity down. Just make it look like some dusty bottom feet. Yeah, I'm not gonna want this. Maybe we can get it a little bit more accurate. Just more sporadic. Turning the contrast up could probably get us there. Let's crank the contrast. Never mind. We'll lower it again. And at this point, it would probably just be easier to paint this, but that's more or less what we're going for. I'm not really too worried about the bottom of the feet. And then we can just sort of paint in some areas. Turn this down a little bit. And then, yeah, on and off. It's more or less what we're doing. You can also see the cracked effect is looking pretty good from here. But that's about it. I guess we could fill the screws here with dust as well. It's pretty overkill. Let's just go ahead and copy this. Can paste this. And with the paint layer, I guess just straight up paint it in. Yeah. Yeah, it just makes it rougher. Okay. I'm cool with that. I think that's a pretty natural place to end this part. We can return to it next time, but I think we're probably good to move on to these upper parts, I'd say. I think we did a pretty good job here, and then once we're done everything, we'll probably come back around and do another pass on everything. But for now, I'd say that we're in a pretty good spot with this. All right, thank you guys for watching, and yeah, we'll tackle the upper part in the next chapter. So I'll see you there. Okay, peace.